government shouldn't get involved with trying to censor and restrict my ability to say these things. In reality, the most significant source of disinformation during the pandemic, with the most influence and greatest impact on the people's lives, was the U.S. government. The greatest purveyor of disinformation has been the U.S. government. All of this was occurring during what was likely the greatest national security threat to our nation in modern history, a global pandemic that killed millions of Americans. During this time, the Department of Homeland Security, working to determine the origins of COVID-19 pandemic and whether taxpayer funding went to conduct risky research in China, was this going on? To our knowledge, we know of no delving into this by the DHS. Where did the virus come from? If it came from a lab, wouldn't that be a biosecurity threat? Isn't that somehow under the purview of the DHS to be looking at where the virus might have come from? At least several of the intelligence agencies now conclude it did come from there. Dozens and dozens of the most esteemed scientists in our country now conclude that it came from a lab. We have labs doing this research in our country. Are you looking into that? You know, what's going on? Are you really trying to protect us from biological threats if we're not being told that you've looked into the origins of COVID virus at all? Instead of focusing on real threats like this, DHS was internally strategizing on how it can expand social media censorship of Americas using third-party nonprofits, as in the words of a CISA official who said, a clearinghouse for information to avoid the appearance of government propaganda. So here's our government using NGOs and using them as a clearinghouse, but let's make sure nobody sees that it's us so it doesn't look overtly like government propaganda. That's coming from your own agencies. A report published last month by the Brennan Center for Justice found at least 12 overlapping DHS programs for tracking what Americans are saying online. It found that the department's programs have veered from its original counterterrorism mission into tracking social and political movements and monitoring First Amendment protected activity of American citizens. This is a serious abuse of power. The report concluded that overbroad mandates, flimsy safeguards, and fragmented oversight have allowed overreach and abuses to proliferate across DHS intelligence programs. This is the kind of abuse of power that should terrify all of us, regardless of which side of the aisle you are on. Even worse, it is taking place while the department is failing miserably at one of its core responsibilities, securing our border. Congress cannot continue to provide more funding responsibility to an agency that so clearly misunderstands its statutory authorities and purpose.